The Hunter's Mark: How a Weekend Getaway Turned Deadly. Alright, so this story comes from a guy named Tom. He and his friend Alex had an encounter with something that changed their lives forever. Both were true crime enthusiasts, always fascinated by unsolved cases and notorious criminals. They never imagined they'd find themselves close to a real-life serial killer. It all started when Tom and Alex decided to take a weekend trip to Willow Creek, a small, picturesque town nestled in the mountains. It was known for its tranquil surroundings, charming architecture, and a peaceful atmosphere. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. At least, that's what they thought. They arrived in Willow Creek late on a Friday afternoon and checked into a cozy bed and breakfast owned by a friendly woman named Mrs. Henderson. She welcomed them warmly, chatting about the town and suggesting some local spots to visit. The two friends were excited to explore the area, but something about the place felt off to Tom from the moment they arrived. After settling in, they decided to take a walk through the town. As they wandered through the streets, admiring the quaint old houses and the quiet, serene environment, they noticed a narrow, overgrown trail leading into the woods. A faded, wooden sign read, "Hunter's Path." Intrigued, they decided to follow it. The path wound through dense trees, casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. The further they walked, the more isolated they felt. After about 20 minutes, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The building was falling apart with broken windows, peeling paint, and a sagging roof. Despite its eerie appearance, their curiosity got the better of them, and they decided to explore it. Inside, the cabin was dark and musty, with old hunting gear strewn about. But what caught their attention was a corkboard on the wall, covered with photographs of people. Some of the photos were decades old, showing men, women, and children. In many of the pictures, the people had a small red mark on their foreheads. It was subtle, but it seemed deliberate. Tom felt a chill run down his spine, but he couldn't figure out why. The photographs haunted them as they made their way back to the bed and breakfast. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the red marks on the photos. He started researching the town on his phone and stumbled across an old article about a series of unsolved murders in the area, all connected by one detail: a small red mark on the victims' foreheads. The killer, known as the Hunter, was never caught. Tom's blood ran cold. He shared his discovery with Alex, who was just as disturbed. They debated whether to go to the police, but ultimately decided against it. They didn't want to get involved in something that could put them in danger. Instead, they agreed to stick to the main parts of town for the rest of their trip and leave the creepy cabin behind. The next day, they tried to enjoy themselves, visiting the spots Mrs. Henderson had recommended. But no matter what they did, the thought of the cabin and the photographs lingered in their minds. When they returned to the bed and breakfast that evening, Mrs. Henderson greeted them as usual, but something about her seemed different. She asked if they had explored any of the local trails, and Tom couldn't help but feel that her question had an edge to it. That night, Tom was restless. He got up and went to the window, looking out at the dark, quiet street. As he stood there, he noticed a figure standing in the shadows across the street. The person was tall and thin, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Tom's heart began to race as he realized the figure was watching the bed and breakfast and holding something in their hand: a camera. Tom quickly closed the curtains and woke Alex, telling him what he had seen. Alex, still groggy, tried to brush it off, but Tom was convinced they were in danger. They decided to leave first thing in the morning. The following day, they packed up quickly. As they were loading their car, Mrs. Henderson came out to see them off, her usual warm smile back in place. But Tom couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she was letting on. They drove out of Willow Creek, both of them feeling a huge sense of relief as they left the town behind. Back home, Tom couldn't stop thinking about the cabin and the photographs. He decided to do some digging into the history of the town and found a series of old newspaper articles detailing the murders connected to the Hunter. One of the victims had been staying at a bed and breakfast in Willow Creek, Mrs. Henderson's bed and breakfast. Tom's stomach dropped. He realized the friendly Mrs. Henderson might not be as innocent as she seemed. He contacted the authorities, but when they went to investigate, The cabin in the woods was gone, and Mrs. Henderson had disappeared without a trace. Tom and Alex never returned to Willow Creek, but the experience stayed with them. They often wondered if they had narrowly escaped becoming the next victims of the hunter. The memory of that trip haunted them, a reminder that sometimes evil hides in the most unexpected places. By sharing this story, Tom hopes to remind others that you never truly know what you're walking into, and that the most picturesque places can harbor the darkest secrets. They had gone looking for a relaxing getaway, but what they found was a nightmare that they would never forget. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.